And I'm back. As I promised in last week's open call, we have been working on some extra programming for Radio ArtEZ, and we start today. Together with the Art Education as Critical Tactics team of ArtEZ, we bring you No School Station, a 4-part miniseries on education outside of the educational institutions. Fitting for times like these. So sit back, close your eyes, and connect. This is episode 1 of No School Station, a miniseries by Studium Generale and the Art Education as Critical Tactics team of ArtEZ. This is exactly the time to rethink education, because what is happening right now is showing us that just staying with the normal won't do. And look, we already have a beautiful project called No School, which is already thinking in other directions. At ArtEZ, we have this professorship on education called Art Education as Critical Tactics. And they have been working with other schools on alternatives for years. They believe in a no-school idea, a creative space in which students and teachers are part of a community of learners, working together in a constant process of co-creation. So, we want to inspire you and inform you about this, but also to invite you to think along. With this podcast series, we wish to open a window into the no-school world. We'd like to share our own process of development and our sources of inspiration with you, the listener. We want to dive into our reflections and our ideas of learning, especially in this time in which we are all in our homes with, well, no school to actually go to. First up is Fabiola Camuti, who takes us on a thought experiment, a way of thinking that is also appropriate for the concept of no school. Free thinking, without limits. What does it mean to be without school?
It is undeniable. These are weird times for all of us. Whether we have to work from home, or follow classes online, or find new ways of staying close to friends and family, all weird. And when times like this one come, it seems a bit like we all tend to spin around trying to do the right thing, or the cool thing. I don't know, quarantine challenges on TikTok, flash mobs from balconies, and a lot of news. Constant stimuli. Every morning, I take my phone, and in less than a minute, I'm already overwhelmed by the insane amount of information I get. 130 WhatsApp texts on groups, social media notifications, everything is way too fast. And thinking that, when this whole mess started, my first thought was, hey, maybe this time we'll really slow down a bit. Maybe this will be the time to rest, just for a few days. But nope, Zoom meetings, Skype conferences, my mother calling me from Italy, and my sister setting up a proper Italian family reunion on WhatsApp. Way too much, guys. Also because life has to keep on going. Work needs to be done. Writing, reading, studying. But maybe, we can choose a bit how to do it. We can choose to take some time for self-learning in this forced no-school situation. Yeah, sure, classes will be there and assignments will be given to us, but we can use some of our time to just sit, close our eyes, and, well, connect. With what? Well, to start with ourselves. In these days, I'm, for example, thinking a lot of this idea of urgency, and about how in our educational community, we tend to immediately connect urgency and crisis with the need to do more and more and more and more. Fixing things, finding solutions, giving opinions to everyone on how to make it better. Rather than taking the time to think just for 1 second about where this urgency actually comes from. Sure, if something is urgent, it needs to be done quickly. So my question for you is, what is urgent for you in this moment? What do you need? I personally discovered that for me it is urgent, necessary, absolutely important to learn again how to be with myself. To listen to some of those weird thoughts I have and to reprioritize. And in doing that, I had the chance of thinking also at my job as researcher, as teacher, as writer, as learner. Do you recognize having a weird feeling you almost cannot place that tells you that something is wrong, but you don't know what that is? Well, I had that in the past weeks when this whole mess started. could not really place it, so I had to find ways to understand it better. So I remembered what I used to feel the same during my study time. And then my school, my mentors, study groups, political gatherings became my sources of inspiration. And then reading. From Marx to Judith Butler, from Angela Davis to Antonio Gramsci. That helped me, for example. As for some of you, might be helpful to listen to your favorite composer, or get lost in the colors of your favorite artist, or watching your favorite actress on screen. It helped me, and made me feel also less lonely, knowing that my feeling of misplacement had been already looked at by others. And so, I decided to find those things again. I decided to give some space to my own thoughts. And I could even give it a name: the loneliness of the individualistic society. That is why, when I joined ArtEZ and the Art Education as Critical Tactics professorship, I felt somehow at home, surrounded by people who were questioning similar things in life. And that is also why, when I started working on the No School project and idea, I felt how urgent and pressuring the discussion was. You're probably wondering, how is this urgent now, in a moment of crisis in which other things are definitely more urgent, like healthcare and well-being? And I agree. These are the most important issues now. Issues of care. Healthcare, but also care in general. Care for one another. And while experts, doctors, nurses do their part in facing this crisis, we, as community of learners, can work on finding back the meaning of something that, in my opinion, lies at the core of society. In schools, we learn. And not only notions about the past or chemical formulas, we learn about being part of a community. We learn about the very own concept of society, of being part of something that is collective. And now that we are obliged to stay at home, now that we feel like we don't have a school anymore, now we can use this time to concentrate on those parts of schools which make education important. It is surely sad, the fact that we need a crisis to be able to reconsider things. But it is also a great opportunity. We can see, for example, what is important about schools when schools are not there. Who's left? Students, teachers, a community of learners. A community indeed. No school does not mean, in fact, not having or not wanting schools to exist. Quite the opposite. It means retrieving those values that made schools a safe space. And not because they are efficient, effective, and productive like our neoliberal society wants us to believe, but because they are free, a place for mentoring, a place for inspiration, a place for critical thinking. And who makes these schools, these places? You, all of you who are listening. So my call for action for you today is this. When you want, take your time to think of your urgencies. Sit and think of 3 things that actually make a school. 3 things you can still feel present even if they are maybe difficult to reach at the moment. And my reading suggestion, when you feel like it, read the part of the prison notebook written by Antonio Gramsci. It's in notebook number 12. Yes, he wrote many of them, and he wrote them from prison, from a fascist prison, turning a place of reclusion into a space for urgent thinking. But we'll get there in our next episode. For now, just sit, close your eyes, and connect.
Our second contribution comes from Jeroen Lutters, Professor of Art Education at ArtEZ. He provides us with the theoretical explanation of what no school actually is. Where does it come from, and where will it lead to?
No school, a matter of urgency. The physician Thomas Kuhn already proclaimed in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions that evolution works with jumps, and crises, like we are in a moment, are always an opportunity to change an outdated situation. There are always several reflexes. The most natural one is focus on the casualties, hands-on, that's it. But in the moments of silence, we can also contemplate on a nearby future, for example, on education. Years ago, a radical experiment called the No School movement started. It started for me after reading one of the most important critiques on industrial society ever written, Ivan Ilyich's Deschooling Society. The most important topics were regular school have become in conflict with good education. Second, regular school is absorbed by a hidden curriculum of social control. Third, regular school can be misused by innovative technologies. The first important point is about the degeneration of education. Education is the process of facilitating learning. Learning is about acquiring new abilities to become a free individual. Illich pointed at the fact that regular school, as the institution that had to provide individual freedom, had become detached from its main responsibility. The school had become an institution providing teaching instead of learning. This brings us to the second point, the hidden curriculum of the school based on the pedagogy and didactics of control. Young people starting in primary education were deformed by getting used to a system of listening instead of learning. The disciplinary system replaced self-trust in self-doubt. The only valuable reality seemed to be the reality of an outside abstract control system, a matrix of obedience. The third issue was about the technological revolution. Technology, we know, is a tool for human development, but it is also a dangerous one when it serves the wrong purposes. It helps us to create new possible worlds, but it also can be used for the benefit of a police state. The main characteristics of this form of terror is the complete underground system, so complex, so anonymous, that nobody can ever stop it. The educational system Illich criticized is in need for a radical shift. But as my father taught me, first master the system to conquer it. I became a rector of the Bernhard Lievengoed University and a professor in arts education at the ArtEZ University of the Arts, designing new educational environments like a new teacher college, a master artist educator, a program No School, and another program called Create Space. The first rule in every No School design became every individual is a creative actor. It was already stated more than once by people like Illich, but I wanted to confirm it again and again. The human being is a creative being by nature and should be supported in his natural growth to realize this creative potential. The role of the teacher is no more than to create the space for the student to become the person he wants to be. Instead of standing above or beside the student, the teacher participates in learning as a co-creator. My second rule became use new concepts instead of old skills. New concepts are the result of new questions, and new questions come in with the new generation. New concepts are grounded in the future. Old knowledge is only useful when it is relevant to understand the reality of today. Knowledge that does not serve this reality of today or tomorrow is in fact misleading and dysfunctional for every creative mind. My third rule became networks are the future of education. Massive bureaucratic institutions function in fact as simulacra that prevent us from a true relation with reality. I started to understand the idea of wandering teachers and learners. meeting each other in physical or virtual places for the purpose of learning, educational spaces without fences, education as a process of self-creation. Years went by, and in making new educational designs, I learned more and more that there was one fundamental problem. Funding for a radical shift in education goes slow when the funder is part of the perverted system, especially when a radical innovation means a serious economic loss for the client, because he has to cope with a conversion of money from the secondary process to the primary process. In my new educational design, it was the student that should be paid by the Department of Education. The primacy to the student being able to reward the teacher as his fellow leading learner. This could be the start of a process of deinstitutionalization and deregulation, and a possibility to create new competing kinds of communities of learning. To say it somewhat more provocative, my proposal meant a severe attack on a neoliberal management machine and the conservative teaching machine, and a radical turn to a natural habitat of learning, a paradoxical situation for my clients, who were of course part of a dominantly conservative administration and somewhat ambiguous about a more democratic and progressive educational administration. Back to the crisis. Churchill once said, "Never waste a good crisis," without being disrespectful to the dramatic situation he was in. No school is at the moment a fact of life. Maybe this is the momentum to make a jump in the direction of deschooling society. What we now need is a commission with some brilliant, creative students and teachers to work out the plans for a serious jump. Something like Limits to Grow, the first report of the Club of Rome. We have to realize good old times will never return. Let's use the silence, not as a time of monsters, but as an opportunity to rebuild the future.
Each episode, we want to end on a piece of music. After all, the human being is a creative creature and should be supported in its creative potential. Whatever form you choose, all of life and no school is primarily about wonder. The pieces you'll hear in these 4 episodes are created especially for this podcast. We invite artists to react on the theme of the episode through music. By doing so, we make creation a part of reflecting, and the sharing of those reflections a starting point for learning. The music for this episode is created by Mirthe Dokter and Tim Hammer. As artists, we can get confused or distracted by the whiteness of a museum, the openness of the stage, and the money flow of institutions. Tim and Mirthe wanted to make a work song, something to get you working. The song Go to the Field is meant to motivate you for some artistic field work.
When I walked there in the farmland, the fields were all green, the flowers they stand up high, like they were the artwork of the cows and the sheep and the farmer, they had to be there. When I walked in a museum, the walls were all white, how could something grow inside? I tried to understand it, but I only saw things that are dead. If you want the real art, go to the field. If you want the real art, talk to the cow. If you want the real art, grow like a plant, right want to see, like a cup of sake beneath the cherry tree. If you want the real art, go to the field. If you want the real art, talk to the crowd. If you want the real art, grow like a plant right in the sand, sharing the space together with insects, the farmers, the grass and the mud. When I walked there in the farmland, the fields were all green, the flowers they stand up high.
And that concludes the first episode of the No School Station, a collaboration between Studium Generale ArtEZ and the Art Education as Critical Tactics team. The show is curated by Fabiola Camuti and Cassandra Onk. It is edited by Joke Alkema and produced and hosted by me, Dennis Gaans, for Studium Generale. Our theme music is by Mauro Casarini. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay inside, stay connected.